What's going on? Uh, Hi, friends. This is Dave, and it is Wednesday night, 6:45 p.m., and we are back on Facebook Live with a Facebook Live thing. This is the third week that we've been doing it. A short little series on faith and science that we're calling Faith and Science. Yeah, really creative. But I really appreciate you watching. I appreciate your feedback. And most of all, I appreciate you being on the ride of this community project called The Good Work. Um, we've been having a lot of fun lately, and I hope that it continues through the holiday season. So thanks for joining. Tonight, after I do this thing, I'm going to open up a Google Hangout or a Google Meetup. So if you have any questions about anything that we talk about, well, I talk about tonight, then you can ask me. So I'll be on for a few minutes if people come on. If not, no worries. If you're not watching this live, you can always shoot a question here in the comments, or you can just hit me up with a DM or a text message or a passive aggressive meme on Twitter or whatever you want. So tonight we come to you live from my office, which is now storage room A for our big move from Midtown over to Old Town. So I apologize for the cluttered background. I learned in video making one-on-one that this can be a distraction, but context says we got to put our stuff somewhere until we put it in a new place. So I thank you for letting me have a cluttered office this week. I think next week it'll be different. So anyways, we are at the third part of our series, and we decided we would go with miracles. Because if there's one thing that we know for sure that we don't know anything about, it's miracles. So let's start here. I think the term miracles is a pretty broad term. Okay, we use it as an adjective. It's kind of I guess adjective. Yeah, it's like it's a miracle this, a miracle that, a miracle drug, a miracle. It fill in the blank. But what does that mean, right? Like, what does miracle actually mean? Does it mean something we didn't expect? Does it mean something that defies laws of nature and science? Does it mean something that actually has like a divine hand come down and touch a thing and then the thing is different? These are all good questions. And I think for a lot of us, the answer can be yes or no to any and all of those. And you may have your own. So I'd encourage you, as you're watching this, think about what are your terms and definitions? What are the boundary markers for you to say that something is a miracle? Let me tell you a story real quick. About a year ago, I had a live group experience that I did on Thursday nights once a month called Doubt Night. And what we would do is we would just sit there and basically live into our skepticism and our agnosticism and our atheism, and we'd ask these questions that didn't resonate well with us as people who considered ourselves spiritual. And one of the topics was miracles. And we bounced around like, what counts as a miracle? But then we started really getting down to it. I mean, isn't it crazy that we just are alive at all, or that there are trees or water or mountains, that dogs will sit on our lap, that cats will ignore us, that we can fly out into outer space, that we can scuba dive into the water, that we have all of these things around us? Isn't everything a miracle? But the more we started saying that, we started thinking, well, if everything's a miracle, then is anything a miracle? Because if it's all a miracle, if it's all that level, nothing differentiates itself from anything else. If everything is that amazing, everything then is on the same plane, and therefore nothing's a miracle. I mean, really, for most of us, miracle means something that stands out, that breaks the pattern of the mold. So we struggled that night, and we didn't really come into the resolution, which wasn't the point of it in the first place. But we talked and we said, what constitutes a miracle? I've got a story for you. I think maybe it'll help us kind of figure out this idea of miracle in our own time. This is a little bit before most of us. We're going to talk about the year 1928 real quickly. So consider, just for a moment, it's September 1928, and there's a middle-aged guy walks, probably beleaguered, into his science lab, and he sits down, as he does, as I guess the scientist does, at their desk with their various tests and analogs and different hypotheses sitting there. And there, among some of his tests, are these petri dishes. And he notices that most of them look the same, but one of them is miscolored. And he picks it up and he looks at it, and he sees this strange bacteria, this strange thing that he had put in the petri dish had been eaten away at. That this mold had gotten to it and had destroyed the bacteria that was in the petri dish. Now, it wasn't a mold that he put there. And he looks at it and he tosses the petri dish over to an assistant who's sitting next to him, and the assistant looks at it and says, I don't know what it is. Hands it back. And this laboratory scientist looks at it and thinks of it, well, just must have been a tainted test. Tosses the petri dish out. And in doing so, Alexander Fleming never discovers penicillin. Now, that's not what happened. Alexander Fleming saw the petri dish, saw the bacteria had been eaten away, saw the mold had somehow affected it, and didn't throw that petri dish away. He investigated it further, and he discovered penicillin, which to us today seems real tame. But in 1928, that was phenomenal. There's a book that's been written, and it's a book of essentially counterfactual, that was hard to say, counterfactual stories, like the one I just gave you, and says essentially, what if Fleming hadn't discovered penicillin? Our gut tells us, well, somebody else would have right around the same time. We know that flight was being discovered, how humans fly. The Wrights had competition, right? But this book argues that because of that time in science, penicillin was so off the radar, it would have been another 5 or 10 years before it was ever intentionally sought after or discovered. So Alexander Fleming discovered penicillin a good 5-10 years before the normal course of scientific discovery would have allowed it. And in doing so, in shaving off that half decade or full decade where we would eventually have got to it, he saved millions and millions of lives because he decided to take a second look at a petri dish that maybe another scientist or him on a bad day would have tossed out and thought of as a bad lab test. To me, that's kind of a miracle. It's not like he led this process up to making this discovery. This was a fluke occurrence, a true fluke that he couldn't have planned for. Now, I don't know if that's the divine hand, and I don't know if that's just breaking the laws of nature and science, but I know it's not necessarily what happens every day. And so it broke the normal narrative, and it changed lives. And to me, that's where we can start talking about miracles. So let's take it down a road of spirituality for a second. In the Judeo-Christian books of faith, the Old Testament and New Testament, there are these stories that are called miracles. They break laws of science and nature. They are, as the words say, God interacting in a way. But I want to suggest something else. I'm not wanting to put science against miracles. I want to put them actually together in a similar lens and suggest something to you. There's a story in a gospel book in the New Testament. Those are the books that talk about Jesus and his life and what he did. And there's a big bucket of stories about Jesus doing these things that I guess we would call miracles, doing things that change someone's life that wouldn't naturally just pop up and occur. There's one in Matthew where Jesus encounters a man who has a skin disease called leprosy. And it's the kind of disease that eats away at the skin, that rots away the nervous system, and eventually kills you. And the story goes that Jesus comes from a big crowd that he had just been talking to off a mountainside. And this person with this skin, the lesions and the illness, the broken blisters and the open sores, comes to Jesus, sees the teacher, the rabbi Jesus, and kneels at his feet and says, "If you're willing, you can make me clean." Now let's stop for a second. At that time, in that place, in that day, a leper wouldn't do that. A leper wouldn't be allowed to do that. People with that skin disease were so considered to be so contagious that they were physically placed in their own contamination camps, their own refugee camps outside of the city walls. They weren't allowed to interact with people, citizens, for fear that just rubbing up against one of them would give you the disease. They were considered unclean. They were considered to be less than human. Now, Jesus here in the story is not in the city. He's up on a mountainside. He's coming down. So he's outside the city walls where there aren't necessarily the same rules. And so the leper makes his way, maybe in front of the crowd, beside the crowd, maybe even through the crowd, and falls at Jesus' feet. And this person who the world says is unclean, is unworthy of living within the city to receive any type of treatment or palliative care or hospice, kneels and says, "Jesus, if you can make, if you're willing, you can make me clean." And Jesus reaches out his hand, as the story goes, and he says, I'm willing, be clean." And so the story goes that the man was cleansed of his leprosy. What's interesting to me here, almost less than that part where it says the leprosy leaves him, is that Jesus, this alternative teacher at the time, this teacher who talked about compassion, about living life, balancing the tables where there's equality, where there's justice, where there's kindness, sees this man who the world has said is unworthy, who is barely human, who is unclean. And he says, "I see you as clean. I welcome you. I reach out my hand. I touch you when the rest of the world won't have anything to do with you." To me, the miracle is in the act of humanity. To me, what I see these stories, and there are many within the ancient scriptures, there are these stories of outcasts, of outliers, of refugees, of slaves, of women, of children, of men, caught beyond something that they can control. And they seek some sort of spiritual guidance, some kind of divine care in their life. And the story that comes through these scriptures are not, "I'm just going to fix you. but I'm going to see you as fully human. I'm going to recognize your humanity. And with that dignity, I will raise you up. To me, that's a miracle. I look around today and I see a lot of bleak stuff. I look around today and the idea of us evolving from animals makes a lot more sense. I don't know if you feel that way, but it feels like we're really in kind of a lizard brain mode in a lot of ways right now. But to be able to reach out to someone, to recognize their humanity, to be able to reach into a place where there are marginalized folk, where there are people who are hurting, who are on the outside looking in, and to be able to lift them up through dignity and compassion and love. Those, I think, are the human miracles today. And I think we see things like our phones, which, a decade, well, maybe 2 decades ago, these would have been unheard of. This is crazy. This is madness. This is Star Trek sci-fi craziness. And we're used to that kind of leap in technology where we have all these amazing things and we can actually live in smart homes and have smart cars, and Uber can drive a driverless car and take you where you want to go. But what about the miracles that center us in understanding that we are not alone in the universe? And I'm not talking about Big G, gray-haired, divine guy in a white robe up in the sky. Like that we have people here on this plane of existence that we have together. That we aren't alone on a rock just orbiting around a star. That we're part of a larger story that connects all of us, that connects us with Alexander Fleming, who created penicillin, to the person before them, to the person before them, who created these technologies and these pieces that have allowed us to get where we are today. We look at the genius and brilliance of these great minds that are with us today, and they're allowing us, maybe not as fast as all of us want, but they're allowing us to reach out and slowly turn the world towards a more just, more kind, more loving place. Are we there yet? Oh, hell no. Oh my gosh. No. But I believe in miracles because I have to. Because otherwise we would just give up, right? We have to believe that something bigger is going on. We have to believe that when we get up in the morning, sometimes something may happen that's beyond our control or our expectations that lead us into a better future. Okay, I've meandered a lot. I hope that made sense. I think a lot of the scientific discoveries that we have encountered in the past 100 years are miraculous. They defy our expectations of discoveries. I think we all have personal stories of things that happen that just cannot be explained. We have that friend or family member who has overcome a great illness. We've had things happen to us, fortunate occurrences in our bleak moments that we can't describe. So yeah, I guess I believe in miracles. My definition is pretty loose. I don't know. How about you? What do you think? I tell you what, I'm going to shut this down. And on our Facebook page, I'm going to just put a quick link about the Google Meet Google. I don't know what it's called. It's like a Google Hangout, but they changed the branding on it. But the link will be there. I'll hang out. If some of you all jump on, that's cool. If not worried about it. Really appreciate you watching. To those who are supporting the project financially, We're incredibly grateful for it. And if you had a good time with this, or you've come to one of our groups recently and that's been fun, just chipping in $5 through the website, thegoodwork.org. That helps us keep this project rolling. So appreciate it. Tomorrow night, which is Thursday, November 16th, we'll be meeting at Cartel Coffee Lab, 6 o'clock, to have a group meeting. We're going to talk about the film Pursuit of Happiness. And then we have a meal and get together, and we're going to talk about some good stuff on Sunday at 1 o'clock at my place. Hit me up for details if you'd like to go to that. Okay, I'm going to open the Google group. I will see you there. Bye. Bye. No, bye.